Today we'll be looking at the very Spec Ops Deathwatch flyer, the Corvus Blackstar. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Today we're reviewing the Corvus Blackstar in line with the new Deathwatch changes that they've seen in the White Dwarf Psychic Awakening release. We'll be taking a look at its datasheet, any obvious combos or synergies on the table, and how I would use one in game. In the background, the Blackstar is a specialised Deathwatch Space Marine flyer, aims to have the armour and firepower to be able to punch through the outer defences of a xenos battle line and deliver its strike team directly to the heart of the foe. The Blackstar is more advanced than some of the other Space Marine flyers in the arsenal, employing sophisticated weaponry and defence systems such as the Infernum Halo launcher, which can shield it from a large amount of dedicated anti-air fire. Each Blackstar is piloted by a veteran tech marine who has trained for years in the craft and works perfectly in unison with the machine's machine spirit. In terms of offensive weaponry, the Blackstar can be fitted out for a number of different roles, but signature weapons include the air-to-air Corvid rockets and the deadly Blackstar cluster launcher to strafe its targets with shrapnel. All very nice, so let's see what it can do in game then. So the Corvus Blackstar is of course a flyer choice for Codex Deathwatch, and when it's armed with a twin assault cannon and 2 Stormstrike missile launchers, it will cost you a reasonably pricey 210 points. Its profile is pretty similar to the Stormraven gunship. It's got a movement of 20 to 45 inches, weapon skill 6+, ballistic skill 3+, strength 8, toughness 7, 14 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 8 and a 3+ save, so fairly tanky, particularly when they're hard to hit from moving very fast. The Stormstrike missile launchers are the same that are mounted on the Stormraven, 72-inch range missiles with strength 8, AP-3 and a flat damage of 3. And they can't be fired on frag mode like the standard missile launcher can be. The model has a few different options. First of all, we can replace the twin assault cannon with a twin las cannon. I think that both are pretty viable. They're both decent sources of damage output, the assault cannons versus infantry, and the las cannons versus tanks, so it kind of depends on what you're missing in the army. For Deathwatch though, it might often be a better idea to try and get more anti-tank in the list. It can also replace the Stormstrike missiles with Blackstar rocket launchers. These ones are a little bit cheaper. You'll save 12 points on downgrading them, so your Corvus will be 198 points if it's still got the twin assault cannon. The Blackstar rocket launcher has 2 different firing options, either the Corvid warhead or the Drakos warhead. The Corvid warhead is good against fly, and the Drakos warhead is supposed to be good against units in cover, but isn't. Really, compared with these 2 profiles, you're just going to be firing the Corvid warheads all the time because they're a bit better. They're both 30-inch range heavy weapons with D6 shots. The Corvid warheads have strength 6, AP- and damage 1, and they add 1 to their hit rolls when they're targeting a unit that can fly. Quite a good general purpose profile here. It synergizes quite well with the assault cannon as having a very similar profile, and having a bonus against flying units is not bad either, as there's plenty of units that do that, whether it's tower drones or engaging actual flyers. They really are an anti-infantry option though, not an anti-flyer option. If you're wanting to fire at planes, then you're going to do better with the Stormstrike still. The Drakos warheads are still heavy D6 as well, but they're strength 4, AP nothing and damage 1, and they just add 1 to hit rolls for targeting units that are in cover. These are just bad. I pretty much wouldn't even use them even if I was targeting units in cover, because that AP-1 is likely to be more relevant than getting +1 to hit. So if you are using this, then just use the Corvid warheads every time. I think they're relatively well pointed versus the Stormstrikes. It depends whether you want a couple of decent missile shots, or if you want a slew of anti-infantry firepower with the interesting anti-fly rule. Next up, you can take the Hurricane Bolter, which is just an additional weapon. It's 10 points, and you should absolutely take this every time. 10 points for up to 12 bolter shots is a great deal. There's not really much more to say about it. It's just very good at mowing down a few more infantry as your Corvus flies about. Finally, the model can take an Infernum Halo launcher or an Auspex array. These aren't weapons, but they're battlefield upgrades. The Auspex array gives you reroll hit rolls of 1 for a model with an Auspex array when targeting an enemy in the shooting phase that can't fly. So essentially a 17% damage buff against non-fly targets, provided of course you weren't already in a Watch Captain aura, in which case it would be obsolete. 5 points for this seems like a pretty reasonable upgrade as well in my opinion, particularly as these guys want to be operating fairly independently. The main opportunity cost though is giving up that Infernum Halo launcher, which is actually pretty good as well. The Infernum Halo launcher also costs just 5 points, and it means that when you're still in supersonic mode, so not when you're in hover mode, then enemy models with fly must subtract a further -1 to hit from their attacks when they're trying to shoot down the Corvus Blackstar in their shooting phase. This one's also 5 points, and it basically means that you're -2 to hit against fly units compared with the standard -1 to hit that you'd get from hard to hit. Again, this is a really nice upgrade, unfortunately somewhat situational, as it's going to be far better against armies that are all flying compared with armies that aren't, in which case you won't get any benefit. So I could honestly see either of these as being pretty viable. I think that the Auspex array is going to be more regularly usable and more regularly consistently doing you extra work, but where you are facing an army where everyone's flying, then that Infernum Halo launcher will be worth its weight in absolute gold. I think in general it will come into effect less, but when it does it will be far more powerful. I'd certainly take one of these and just decide your choice based on what you want to tailor your list against slightly, maybe bearing in mind what people are likely to be fielding at events or in your local meta. In terms of special rules, the Corvus now has Combat Doctrines and Shock Assault as well. Combat Doctrines will be great for first turn strikes with extra AP on things like the Assault Cannons and Blackstar Rocket Launcher, and AP4 on those Storm Strikes or Las Cannons certainly will help it chew through tanks. It has all the same sort of flyer rules as a Storm Raven, so -1 to hit when it's moving fast, having to pivot when it's moving fast, and not being able to charge or charge things that don't have the fly keyword. It also has the Hoverjet rule, which means that you can give up all of that for just 20-inch movement, and it does also have the Crash and Burn special rule, where when it goes down you roll a dice, and on a 6 it'll deal a big explosion, where every unit within 6 inches takes a full D6 mortal wounds, so that's far bigger explosion than the Storm Raven is. Sadly, despite being an equivalent to the Storm Raven in many different ways, it doesn't have the power of the Machine Spirit special rule, meaning that you will be taking the -1 to hit penalty if you move and shoot with your heavy weapons. This is a bit annoying to be honest, and it certainly does hamper your damage output when you're doing exactly what you want to be, flying all over the map. It also means that it's not able to use the Vengeance of the Machine Spirit stratagem, which is an excellent one for either firing a weapon on death or auto-exploding. Finally, the Corvus Blackstar is of course a transport, and it can transport 12 Deathwatch infantry. Each jump pack or Terminator model takes the space of 2 other models. It can also transport bikers as well, which take the space of 3 other models, but unfortunately still can't transport Primaris for some reason. This does give it some decent flexibility to be able to put an entire kill team in it and get out halfway up the board, and it's an interesting sort of trade-off compared with them just deep striking in as they might have done anyway. Obviously this one doesn't cost command points, but it does give you the chance of getting shot down either on turn 1 or turn 2, potentially giving the opponent a chance to deal damage to the kill team before they even get to strike. If your Corvus can weather a turn right next to the enemy though, then it means that they'll be an ideal place to get out and murder some xenos. So how will we try and get more out of the Corvus on the table then? First of all, and somewhat annoyingly, the Corvus is also excluded from the rule Mission Tactics from Deathwatch, stopping it from getting those nice rerolls of 1 against whatever slot is most relevant in your opponent's army. It also doesn't get the special issue ammunition with that Hurricane Bolter, as vehicles can't access it, so it really is just the Corvus Blackstar and the buff to its AP via Combat Doctrines or its Auspex array. In terms of special characters, it can of course get some accuracy buffs from the Watchmaster, and potentially get a defense buff from the Space Marine Librarian, who could give it Might of Heroes for +1 toughness. The new Chaplain litanies also aren't such a bad shout on a big unit such as the Corvus, and you could have a Chaplain throw +1 to hit at it before it moves away, to counter the heavy weapons penalty that you get from not having power of the Machine Spirit. In terms of stratagems, the Corvus can make use of a fair few that the Deathwatch have available. Firstly, Armour of Contempt to shrug some mortal wounds can always be good for a frontline valuable flyer. They can get a fair bit of good use out of the specific anti-Xenos stratagems, such as the anti-Eldar one, and you can give the flyer +1 to wound against a given target, with the various 2 CP Doctrines one, although it's maybe not quite as powerful as the kill teams, seeing as in some variations you might be firing with fairly mixed weaponry, want to be firing some guns at different things. It could also potentially make good use of the Decapitation Doctrine for 2 CP. As a very fast moving flyer, you might find it in a position where it might be able to land right next to the enemy warlord and then open it up with a whole load of hurricane bolters and things into him. Being able to reroll wound rolls would certainly allow you to stack extra damage and make sure that the warlord is definitely dead for good. From the new White Dwarf supplement that they got, they gained access to Big Guns Never Tire, which is actually incredibly relevant on the Blackstar. If it's moving, then this will be the equivalent of giving it +1 to hit for all of those heavy weapons, which is a pretty reasonable first turn damage boost in my opinion. It's not an enormous big change the world sort of damage boost, but for 1 command point, it's not the worst to make your Alpha Strike just that little bit nastier. So how would I personally run the Corvus Blackstar on the table? I personally feel like the different main weapons are fairly well balanced against each other. I could happily take the assault cannons or the las cannons, and the storm strikes or the Corvid missiles. Within the context of a Deathwatch army though, I'd typically be leaning a bit more to taking the las cannons or the storm strikes, as you need to really pack in as much anti-tank in other places as you can, as the kill teams can pretty well deal with anything else. I would always take the Hurricane Bolter, and I could happily be swayed either way with the Infernum Halo Launcher or the Auspex Array, but either way I would certainly take one of these. Then you sort of need to be deciding whether you're planning to use it as a transport or more as a flying gunship. If using it as a transport, you're likely going to be loading it up with a veteran kill team, as there aren't really all that many other options that are very viable. I think about trying to counter-deploy the opponent, either put it so far back that they're not going to be able to shoot it down, or if they are going to be able to shoot it down either way, then it's not the worst idea to put it a bit further forwards, so when your kill team have to bail out, at least they'll be able to get a bit closer to the foe. From there you're going to want to move up turn 1 to somewhere where you might be able to get them out the next turn, and get those Hurricane Bolters and various other heavy weapons to work on the enemy army. But you don't really want to be setting yourself down right next to an enormous horde, for example, as one potential flaw in the Corvus's design means that if you have enemy units all around the flying base and you don't have anywhere to get your veterans out when it blows up, then it means that those veterans will be lost, so you don't want this to happen. All being well though, hopefully the Deathwatch's kill team gets out and lays low at some of its targets, and the Corvus is free to either stay in hover mode and contribute additional firepower with raised accuracy, or perhaps swoop off and use its decent movement to hunt down enemy elements that are either out of line of sight, or maybe assassinate some characters by jumping next to them and then hitting them with a salvo of heavy weapons. You could potentially just run the Corvus as a pure gunship, perhaps hovering at the back to provide some anti-tank fire support with a Watchmaster to keep those shots a bit more accurate, although you might be better with things like a Repulsor Executioner or perhaps some Contemptor Mortis Dreadnoughts with las cannons if you want to do the same thing. Really its main advantage over these is its good mobility, which is a decent factor, but it would likely lose in most straight fights between this and other dedicated anti-vehicle platforms. As you are winging this thing around the battlefield, every time you fly over enemy units in the movement phase, you could potentially make use of its Blackstar Cluster Launcher, which I'm very sorry that I haven't mentioned so far. I certainly meant to in the abilities section. This one does a mortal wound on the roll of 6 to each member of a unit, meaning that you can get an average of 1 or 2 mortal wounds out of it if you go over a squad that's 10 strong. Again, it's not absolutely loads, but it's not nothing either, and you could whittle through a few troops like this. Overall, as it stands, I think the Corvus Blackstar just isn't really quite as competitive as the kill teams for Deathwatch. Lack of power of the machine spirit and mission tactics certainly isn't great, and the kill teams themselves just don't really need that fly transport all that much when they can deep strike via the teleportarium. A few Corvuses loaded with kill teams would be a really fun army to play, I'm sure, but I'm just not sure it's quite as strong for Deathwatch's top builds compared with going with kill teams on foot and getting anti-tank firepower either through repulsors, Contemptor Dreadnoughts, or elsewhere out of the Codex. To be honest, I think that this guy could either use a slight points drop or maybe power of the machine spirit to become just that little bit more relevant and efficient. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on the Corvus down in the comments below. It'd be interesting to hear anyone who's had experience of it compared with just dropping the kill teams in with deep strike. Has the chance for it to be shot down been a significant factor or not so much? We'll hopefully have a couple of Deathwatch army lists coming out sometime in the near future, so please feel free to subscribe if you'd like to see that. Auspex Tactics also does plenty of other 40k content. Finally, if you've been enjoying these videos regularly, then feel free to give my Patreon link a look in the description below. As well as supporting the channel, you can also see some videos early, get a chance to vote on what will be coming next for the channel, and there's also the occasional prize draw, such as the next one where we'll be giving away some Primaris Marines from the No Fear box set. If any of that sounds interesting, then please feel free to take a quick look, it is what keeps these videos coming. In any case, a big thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.